the Agile brand.
Welcome everybody, this is Paul Foley and you're listening to Bulk Exchanges, where we explore the human stories behind heavy civil construction and technology. Along with my co-host Rachael Mahoney, we will be introducing guests from all areas of our trillion-dollar industry, from the legends that shaped modern infrastructure to the next generation who will revolutionize it. We will discuss ideas, opportunities, and strategies for what's next. All right, well, we've got Steve Egger. So, hello, Steve. Thanks very much for joining us here today on Bulk Exchanges. Steve, you and I know each other now for a few years. Both of us are in the heavy civil construction world here in the Bay Area, Northern California. We'd love to hear about, your background, how you got into the construction and heavy civil space, and especially how you became known as Captain Dirt. So I'd love for you to tell us your story there, Steve.
Yeah, sure, Paul. I'm going to start back at the beginning. And my father was in the business. He had a project at Chevron Refinery in Point Richmond, California. And that was 1977. He got me a summer job, and I was 16 years old, pressure washing equipment for a company out of Petaluma called Global Paving. And my job was to pressure wash, grease, and fuel the equipment. It rotated in and out because they were working on a chemical pad out there, dirt pad. So that was my job. And one morning, a gentleman didn't show up to run the bulldozer. And my boss's name was Jerry Young. And he asked me if I knew how to run a bulldozer. And of course, my answer was yes. And he drove me out in the truck and to the site and gave me a quick 5-10 minute lowdown on how to run the 550 John Deere bulldozer, towing a field disc behind it. And that was the start of my career. I was a lifeguard in Point Richmond in summer as a lifeguard assistant, did little jobs like that. But that was my number one construction job, was in 1977 with Global Paving. And then I went ahead, I played football. I went ahead and played football in college. I got a degree in agricultural management. Probably thought I was going to be a professional football player, and that didn't pan out. So when I graduated from college, I had another friend of the family. There was an opportunity for a job at Kiewit Pacific in Concord, California as a project engineer in their takeoff department.
Okay.
So that was cool. I was really excited that a company the size of Kiewit, Peter Kiewit, was hiring Steve Egger. So I was to the moon and back, excited. I went to work for Kiewit.
And was Kiewit as big back then as they are today? Steve, were they nationwide at that time?
Yes. The main headquarters were in Omaha, Nebraska, and they had different divisions. And the division that I worked for, it was with a guy named Gary Mitchell and John Jansen. We were out of Concord, California, called Kiewit Pacific.
Okay.
And when I got there, I was going to be take off for their stormwater pollution plants, doing takeoffs and dirt takeoffs and what have you. And they were short a field project engineer, Rachael Solano, in Fairfield. It was a big dirt job with 651 scrapers and D10 bulldozers. So I got 2 weeks shipped out to there, got a pickup truck, and became a field engineer under the guidance of a gentleman by the name of Rob Lane, who was my boss, who's now the president of O.C. Jones, which is a large grading contractor here in the Bay Area.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so Rob took me under his wing, and I got trained as a project engineer. And then there was another gentleman by the name of Kenny Peterson, who was the foreman. And I was there every morning with my lunchbox ready to go to work. And they started teaching me about scrapers, and dirt goes from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill. This is what the stakes mean. And there was no GPS or anything like that. So we had to build off stakes, but I learned quick. And Kenny Peterson, one day at lunchtime, he goes, everybody here's got a nickname. He goes, we're going to call you Captain Dirt because you like this. You like this work. We can tell. I was there every day this excited, these big scrapers going in circles. It was fun. So that's where Captain Dirt came from. It was Kenny Peterson named me that. And that was 1980. I got out of college in 85. It was probably 86, 87, right in there.
Nice, nice.
And it was a good experience. And Kiewit was a great place for me to cut my teeth and learn the business end of it, because Kiewit's very business oriented on tracking quantities and loads and cubic yards and all that, tire wear. And I learned a lot in those 2 years at Kiewit. And then I moved on. I went from, all this real quick in a nutshell, is I went from a kid washing heavy equipment with a pressure washer. And my top job, I can say, two of my top jobs, I was vice president of operations for top grade construction, which is now Goodfellas. I had that position for 12 years, and then I became a vice president of estimating, chief estimator for another 5 years. So, I always tell people I want to write a book. Once upon a time, I was this kid from Point Richmond, and then I was a vice president of a big company. It was pretty cool,
It's a classic story, Steve, and it's somebody who literally, started on the ground, like you said, just power washing and knowing the equipment and seeing all the excitement happening that's on any large project like that. And I guess the reason we kind of tie in the Captain Dirt, you and I got connected over the last few years. Greener Excavations, my excavation grading company, I was looking at a project down in Woodside, and I was super busy at the time. And a buddy of mine, Joe White from LVI Engineering, I was reaching out to him. I said, I really need an estimator to help me bid this project. Otherwise, it'll pass me by. So he said, oh, there's this guy, Steve Egger. Give him a call, see if he can help you out. So that's how you and I got connected first. We developed a good rapport. You and I were over and back chatting. I could tell you were a really good guy. And I could tell you were much more established and accomplished. But it meant a lot to me that you took the time to still help me out and put together the estimate from the job. But when you sent over the estimate, I didn't realize at the time that your email was Captain Dirt. And then we got talking one day, and I started talking about this side hustle that I was working on called Bulk Exchange, and, explaining everything about what it was all about. And then you pointed out to me, and this is where I'm super excited to share this with the listeners, about something that you were working at back in sometime during the 90s, Captain Dirt's material exchange, or would you just tell us all about that, because it's a fascinating story and how it all comes full circle here.
So I've always been hustling asphalt grindings and dirt, excavations in the Bay Area, and that's part of my success of my career. Was I was always finding a place to either get dirt or grindings or get rid of them. I got to know the truckers. I knew the dump sites. I knew all the landfill places that wanted it. So that was my hustle, was just knowing all those places. I mean, I knew every dump site in the Bay Area. And that was I can tell you the date, because it's when my wife was pregnant with my son in 1993, 31 years ago. My son's 30, she was pregnant with him. So I had come up with this idea to have a newspaper that would show that, people that needed dirt and wanted to get rid of dirt. So there was a place on the left side column that he said you either needed or you wanted to get rid of excess materials, mostly dirt, grindings, aggregate-based stuff. And then we did that very successfully. I ran that newspaper. At the time, I was working for Oliver De Silva as an area superintendent, and Rich Gates of Oliver De Silva gave me permission to have that newspaper. And my wife was on maternity leave from Chevron with our son, and she helped put it together, and we put it together, and it was a very successful news rag. It came out every month with all new dump sites and what have you. And we got up to about probably 50 subscribers in the Bay Area. It wasn't really hard to get them, this word of mouth, not a lot of advertising. And so we did that. And then as we moved along, people wanted to put ads in there for sheet pile, excess steel beams, lagging, certain construction materials. So we changed the name from Captain Dirt's Material Exchange to the Material Exchange. And my wife and I ran it again for another 5 years. And after about 10 years, it was just getting to be too much with the second child and my kids growing up and my workload. I became an area manager and I couldn't do it anymore. So I sold that company to my sister-in-law who lived in Hillsburg. And she was running it very successfully out of her house in Hillsburg. They changed the name to Job Site Recycle because they felt like they were getting a lot of materials that were recycled, whether it was wood or steel, what have you. And she ran it successfully for 5 years and then sold it to another company that was going to put everything online. And they did, and that was kind of the history of Captain Dirt's Material Exchange. It was very cool.
I love it. And that's why when you and I got, talking about, first of all, you were bidding, a job for me, and we were, yapping over and back about that. And then I started talking about Bulk Exchange, this online marketplace. And then you were talking about that you did the same thing in paper form. Like I remember you telling me that you'd be heading off to the FedEx printer shop and printing out all these magazines and sending it out there. So I think it's awesome because you were ahead of your time, and it says a lot of where your head was at, but the technology just wasn't there yet. So I think it's super cool, and that's why we've been so fortunate that you've been helping us along the way here with Bulk Exchange, giving us advice and counsel and of all the experiences you've had.
Well, what I think is actually so cool, Steve, is the fact that here we are in a podcast with you after hearing that story. One of the things that I took away is the fact of the writing a book, of how unlikely it was from where you started and where you ended up. And you've got a couple of co-hosts here that are similarly. So from Paul, from a farm in Leitrim, Ireland, to a tech bro and now a podcast host, and me from a homestead in Alaska to leading a technology startup. It's a
Rachel, don't be putting it out on the airwaves that I'm a tech bro. That somehow makes it official. So I'd like to disregard that statement.
There's no hiding it now. There's no hiding it now.
So with my story, Rachel, I'll share with you. I was telling Paul one day that, when I was at Top Grade, I was the vice president. That was I would go to Chico State, Sac State, San Jose State, and I would recruit our interns and our new engineers. And I would tell my story, and I'm passionate about what I do and what I've done in my career, and I love it. I mean, I still love it. I'm 62. I've been consulting for 5 years now, and I still love getting up and going out to job sites and making things happen and solving problems. And I don't care what you do for a living, but the money, it's always been there, money good, family was taken care of. Both my kids got paid going through school because I made a good living at it. But I tell these kids, a room full of 30, 40 kids, I said, hey, if you don't mind getting up every morning and going to work and being out in the sunshine, and some days it's rainy, but building things, and when you get done building it, you're driving down 880 and with one of your family members, you say, I built this freeway. I tell you, Paul and I were chatting about, I was in San Francisco Thursday and Friday and started telling my wife every street that I'd paved in San Francisco. And I'll tell you, it's 2 pages. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's fun. So I recruit kids. And when I recruit those kids, I tell my story, not only the success of becoming a vice president, but just being in this business and how rewarding it is financially, how rewarding it is building things and being proud of what you do. So I've been in both my kids. My son's 30. He's a operations manager for Southwest Concrete Paving out of El Mirage, Arizona. He has projects all over the Midwest. They're multi-million-dollar military airfield projects. He does what we call white concrete paving, big, thick concrete paving on runways. And he's the operations manager. He hired his sister last year, who's been in the business for 3 years as a project engineer. My daughter's 26 years old. She's kind of a cowgirl up in Sonora, but she's now stationed at Tinker, Oklahoma at the airfield base, building a big indoor hangar project with a company named Harper out of San Diego. So both my kids are in it. And when I was preaching to my kids when they were growing up, you need to do this. You know, my daughter wanted to be a vet, and my son wanted to be the next Google tech guy. He graduated with honors out of University of Arizona, Eller School of Business. They didn't want to have anything to do with the construction until they both got done with school, and they'd spent a few years out in the real world. They said, "Dad, we want to do what you do."
Yeah, and I think it's fantastic, Steve. And my oldest is in his just started this week into his second year doing construction management in Chico State, and I'm immensely proud of that as well. And speaking of the kids, because we know it on the job sites, there's a labor shortage. We as the older guys of the industry now, we know we need to entice and pull in these younger folks. Your two kids that I know you're immensely proud of. You say it all the time when we talk of them. You've been seeing through their eyes now, the next generation that's coming into construction. What advice or insights do you have for, what the construction industry needs to do to entice and bring in more females, more, younger folks to get them in? It's so necessary.
I think that being the new generation here in construction, the technology and the tools that we have out there versus what maybe you and I came up through, or Rachael is used to as well, is it's old school tools, and I can bid a job on a piece of paper in a calculator, but it'll take me 3 or 4 days and do a takeoff, where my son and my daughter, they can get on Bluebeam and do a takeoff faster than I can turn the page on the piece of paper accurately, more accurate than I can. And then you have tools like HCSS, the bidding system that you can bid the job on. And I'm very familiar with HCSS, so I was able to be up on that. And I'm really up on all the Trimble GPS technology. But the technology is pretty cool. And if you're a young person, what are we calling those kids now between 20, my daughter's 26 and my son's 30, but they are very tech savvy in this construction industry. And when you're dealing with some of these larger companies like Kiewit or Harper, they're doing, multi-million-dollar airfield jobs. You have to be able to go on to Bluebeam and put your stuff on Bluebeam. If there's a change order, you got to be able to redline it on Bluebeam and send that RFI over, because that's how everybody expects it. But I think it's intriguing for these younger kids to do that. And then it's always my spiel is that, you can come from a kid pressure washing equipment to a vice president. Both my kids, and I hate to just be the money person, talk about money, because I told my daughter, if you're happy, you said I can say what I want, you guys can edit this. I said, if you're happy sticking your hand up a cow's ass, $15 an hour, you have at it. Because I got another job that will pay a lot more than that. Because my daughter, she did artificial insemination, so she used to get in it,
Yeah.
And I said, but do it. If you do it, honey, I support you. But I'll tell you what Daddy did for the last 40 plus years. And they saw it. I mean, the kids, it was good. We had a good family life, and the construction. I came home from work happy.
Steve, that's amazing. That just what you said there, because I think one of the things that we're hoping to highlight in this process is what the opportunity is, right? It's something that so few folks, especially when there are really flashy things out there that you can choose to do. But when you really break it down into the building blocks of a great life, it's those things that makes this industry so appealing, and appealing for folks that aren't normally thought of when you think of those folks that you want to bring in. So obviously you're one heck of a recruiter to get the kids in the industry. And obviously, we agree with the technology, not just because we're doing it, but, HCSS is our partner. So I'm a big fan.
Rachael, you've got some amazing statistics, Rachael, for what entices a decision, or what pushes the decision making in regards to technology on choosing which type of business to go to.
Yeah. So one of the things that really surprised me, and don't take our word for it, these actually came from a bunch of exit surveys from new graduates across construction programs in different states. And, not surprisingly, their first consideration was salary, but only by 30% 36%. And then the second major consideration for coming into the industry and who they went to work for was what technology they were using. And as I always like to say, it's because you can't get these young, brilliant people who have grown up using technology their whole life to go to work for a company, no matter how much you pay, when you're using corkboards and fax machines. So, we know that it's a central part to bringing in, the next generation, and especially in the next 5 to 7 years, because for every 5 people that retire within that time frame, the industry has only been successful in recruiting 1 replacement. So we know there's going to need to be a lot of incentive, both through technology and tools, and just folks like you, Steve, that are great, at extolling the virtues of coming to work in the industry. And so, again, that's amazing. But the other part of this is not just getting them here; it's how to set them up to thrive. And that brings us to one of the main things that you'll hear each and every one of these podcasts. It's the thing that Paul and I decided was what we cared most about, that we had in common. And we think it's so central as a quality to what makes someone successful in any industry, but specifically this one. And that's grit. And so I'd love to hear from you, Steve, what grit means to you. And then how do you think that we can help build that with the next generation in this industry?
Well, I'll share my secret. I put gunpowder on my Wheaties in the morning. How's that?
There you go. There's the magic sauce right there.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it can be covered a lot of different ways. But my grit, Steve Egger's grit, is getting to work on time and have a plan. I don't care if you're a laborer, an operator. If you're the truck driver, you come to work on time and you have a plan. And when I say a plan, I mean, you either brought your lunch with you, you're going to stop and get lunch, but have a plan for the day. It's going to be a 10-hour day, so you went to bed early. And this sounds corny, but I'm telling you, this is that stuff that I taught my kids. Sounds kind of corny, but it's like you can't come to work in this business half-cocked. You got to be ready to roll. You got to. Plan A is going to go right in the toilet in about 20 minutes, right? So when plan A goes in the toilet, you got to have plan B ready, and you got to be able to shuck and jive and get into plan B. And when you do those things, I'll give you some statistics. Is when I was at Gelati Brothers as a foreman and a superintendent going up through the business from Mario Gelati and Mike Gelati, not one of my jobs ever lost money. My jobs, and that was jobs were ranged from 400,000 up to 5 million. And there were some tanker jobs that the estimators really missed it, but you got to come to work ready to roll. I mean, that grit for me was just being ready to go. And you got to have plan A, plan B, and plan C. If you're a leader, I've been a boss my whole career. If you're the leader, you got to lead. You just have to lead people. You have to show that, hey, man, we're short today. I'm going to grab the shovel and help put that asphalt in the bucket of the skip loader. We're all going to get out and we're going to get it, And when you do that, you can line up the 20 guys and they'll jump off the Golden Gate Bridge with you. If you don't do that, those guys are going to sit there and watch you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. So that was my success, and that's my grit. My grit's just being ready and to jump in. And, there's days I got on tractors, Paul. I mean, I was the boss, and the guy called in sick. I got on the tractor, and I knew how to run the tractor. And I ran the tractor probably better than the guy that called in sick. But, my crew knew that I always had their back, and we had a plan. Always have a plan. And even if you're just, like you say, if you're the flagger, if your plan is you're going to be on your feet all day, make sure you got comfortable socks on. Make sure you got your lunch. Make sure you got plenty of water. I mean, have a plan. That's just, I don't know if that makes sense to you folks, but that's kind of my grit.
No, it absolutely does. It's being prepared, because being prepared means that whatever comes at you, you'll push through it. You'll make it work. You'll figure it out. Whether you're on a bog stuck up to your oxters in a field in Leitrim, or whether you're on a job site in the East Bay in California. Things, especially when you're dealing with trucks and heavy equipment and weather and traffic and things not working out, What did Mike Tyson say? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So you got to be prepared. What are you going to do after that when you get punched in the face? So I love exactly what you're saying there, Steve, because it's just about figuring out what plan B, C, and D are going to be, because inevitably, you've got a plan at 7 a.m. At 7:05 a.m. Things start to go sideways. So I love that, Steve.
Well, unsurprisingly, a half an hour is not enough time for a story like yours, from cleaning the grease and dirt off machines to leading companies and then inspiring the next generation. This has been amazing. And I can't thank you enough on behalf of Paul and I for joining Bulk Exchanges and letting folks hear a little bit about your story. And we'll certainly provide information for where else they can learn more. And again, just thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, folks. Anytime. Thank you.
Yes, Steve. I consider you a friend, and I the advice and the counsel and the stories and the experiences you have, we really appreciate it. And thanks very much for joining us here on Bulk Exchanges.
You're welcome, folks. Thank you.
On behalf of myself and Rachael, we want to thank our guests and listeners for joining us on another episode of Bulk Exchanges, where industry meets infrastructure and shapes great conversations. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And also find us at bulkexchange.com and on socials at Bulk Exchange. And remember, until next time, keep building, listening, and learning.
The Agile brand.
Hi, I'm Greg Kihlstrom, and thank you for listening to this podcast, which is part of the Agile Brand Podcast Network. As some of you may know, I'm the host of another successful podcast, The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, Apple's top-ranked enterprise marketing podcast. 3 times a week, I talk with C-suite leaders from world-leading brands and platforms about the latest trends, issues, and challenges in marketing technology, AI, and customer experience. Be sure to subscribe so you too can join the thousands who have already followed to hear us discuss the top issues and challenges you need to know about, and get real-world insights and advice which you can quickly apply to your biggest marketing challenges. Check out the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast wherever you listen, and make sure to follow or subscribe so you can catch the very latest.